Now, you are a great authority in censorship, which is where the kind of basis of Video Nasties comes from. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
So about
your background.
My background? Well, my background is I used to be a journalist, and I was a journalist in the mid-1980s when the whole Video Nasty thing first blew up. So I was writing about Video Nasties, not so much for the daily press, because the daily press was on the whole in favour of censoring Video Nasties. I was writing about it for trade magazines like Broadcast and some of the video trade magazines, or magazines like Sight and Sound, published by the British Film Institute. So I was very much there at the time and watching what was happening, analysing it. I interviewed the British Board of Film Classification as they'd become by the mid-80s. And I've kept an interest up in it ever since.
So were you a particular fan yourself of the Video Nasties when they were first when they first came out?
Well, I've always been interested in horror movies, but of course in this country it's always been quite hard to see horror movies, at least in their pure form, because they were so often censored, or they were banned, or people didn't just bother to submit them to the BBFC because there was no point in doing so because they thought they wouldn't be passed. So when uncensored home video became a reality in the early 80s, it was a fantastic time for people who were interested in horror movies, because for the first time they could see some of these films. Now, often, of course, they were not in very good condition, they were bad copies and all of that, but at least for the most part they were uncut, and at least you could see a wider variety of stuff that had been available before, until, of course, the door was slammed shut again with the Video Recordings Act in 1980.
Is there a fine line between what is censorship and what is control?
Well, I think that censorship is a form of control, basically. And in this country, the authorities, I think, have always really worked with the rubric that the more popular a cultural form is, the more controlled, that is, censored, it has to be. Television's a good example, cinema's a good example, and that was why when, home video first came along, the very end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, the authorities got themselves in a tizzy about it, because here for a while was a medium that was both popular and uncontrolled, and that just wasn't going to last.
Is it interesting? I mean, the particular theme that runs through tonight's film is the whole concept that by having a Video Nasty in the home leaves it open to children seeing it, and then we see events like the James Bulger incident and its relation to Child's Play 3. Do you think that there is any correlation between a Video Nasty and what could potentially happen in the wrong hands?
Well, for one thing we can say for certain, there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that videos in general, or Child's Play 3 in particular, played any role in the James Bulger case whatsoever. It's true, that if you have an 18-rated video in the home, it's quite possible, if that home contains children and if the parents are not very responsible, children might be able to see it. But I really don't believe that seeing a so-called Video Nasty would turn a child violent. It might frighten the child, which is not necessarily a good thing, or give it nightmares, not necessarily a good thing. But the idea that censorship is premised on, or at least censorship in this country is premised on, which is that if you see something violent, it will make you violent, is that there is no evidence for that, whatever people may say.
And with regards to tonight's documentary, Video Nasties, Draconian Days, when you were first approached by Mark and Jake, what did you think about a documentary being made about this context?
Well, I mean, this is by no means the first documentary. I mean, there are at least 4 that I'm aware of, and I'm very, very glad that Mark and Jake and other people too have made these films, because this is an episode that really, really, really needs to be documented. It's all very well people like me writing books about it and articles about it, but it really does lend itself incredibly well to a cinematic or video presentation, and the work that they've done thus far has been absolutely superb.
And with regard to your own writing, if people would like to read more about this subject, what's the name of your book?
Well, my most recent book is called Film and Video Censorship in Modern Britain. It was published in 2011 by Edinburgh University Press, and it's still pretty up to date.